Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, I'm going to be teaching you how to play one of the most annoying chess openings in existence, and it is called the Catalan. Now, I should say, this opening is played at the absolute highest level of chess. It is played by all of the best grandmasters in the world. It is played by the best computer engines in the world. And for that reason, we will be studying several games by the highest rated person to ever play this opening, Magnus Carlsen. Now, I'll also include a game where I play against one of my subscribers, an intermediate player in a rapid game, and you are going to see just how powerful this opening is. So this video is going to be split into a couple of parts. First, I'm going to show you some of the theory behind the opening and how to play it and certain variations. Then I'm going to show you 3 examples by Magnus himself, defeating some of the best players in the world. And then I will show you that game that I played against the subscriber. Now, I do need to say, a lot of beginners and intermediate level players watch my videos. I think the Catalan is best suited for people who are already solidly intermediate and into the advanced and master territory. And the reason for that is because the beginners will not be able to feel the impact of this opening because it's a bit slow and positional and really tries to slowly put pressure on your opponent. But of course, if you're watching this and you're 700 and 800 elo, you're more than welcome to try it. But at that level, your opponents just explode. So they play complete nonsense. And so you will likely not be able to implement some of this stuff. At that level, you still may need just basic fundamentals, playing for the center, which this opening does as well. So here we go. We are going to go and learn how to play the Catalan like Magnus Carlsen. Now, I do just want to say, let me enable the analysis in all of these games. And, you know, we can really start things off on a regular board, on a regular just analysis board. The Catalan is an opening that begins after d4, although it could, you know, transpose. It could, meaning you could start with c4 and then it could be d4. And the general setup of the Catalan is that you play the Queen's Gambit with c4. The point of this move is that if black captures, elementary reason is you get the entire control of the center. And in a nutshell, the Catalan for white is d4, c4, like this, followed by knight to f3, okay, followed by pawn to g3. This is the Catalan. Now, the general idea of this opening is to put this bishop on g2, where it pressures the length of the diagonal. Castle. You'll notice that we are not touching the pieces near our queen, or the pieces on the queen side. You will also notice this pawn is perpetually able to be captured. The reason for that is that taking this pawn is a risk by black, let's put it this way. And the point is that it's opening up this diagonal. Another important thing here is that this is a flank pawn. Each player has 2 center pawns, D and E. And so this pawn, if it ever takes the pawn in the center, we are trading a flank pawn for a central pawn, which is a nice advantage for us. Now, black taking on c4, this pawn can either be recaptured with the knight or with the queen. It's very difficult to protect this pawn for black because if they do it too quickly, white in many positions will undermine, like this, undermine the pawns, and potentially leave black with a very damaged set of double pawns, double isolated pawns on the A and C files. And, as always, you have a lot of tricks with this bishop. In a nutshell, that is what the Catalan looks like. Of course, for this to be a pure and real Catalan, black must play what black is doing in this game, which is a Queen's Gambit decline. For example, your opponent may begin with a Dutch defense. You can still play knight f3, g3, bishop g2 castles against almost anything black does. For example, if black plays a King's Indian defense, of course, there are different openings here, but guess what? It's not really the Catalan, but you can still play the same setup. But of course, things differ a little bit. And so in this video, we will just be talking about the pure, straightforward Catalan, right? In the Catalan, black has multiple setups, okay? the setups basically include an early capture on c4, a capture on c4 where then black hangs on for dear life and tries to keep the pawn. Another setup, which is the bishop to b4 check and the retreat. When the bishop comes to b4, you frequently just trade off your dark squared bishop. It's very normal. You'll actually see that in the practice game because I played it actually before recording this part. So bishop d2. And the closed Catalan, so when they take on c4, of course, it's the open Catalan because the center is opening up. And if black plays bishop to e7, this is the closed Catalan. This is the open Catalan. And you have the closed Catalan with c6, b6, and just rock solid. Recapturing this pawn, the best way to do so is with the queen, like this. Black now has a move here, which is very interesting. Pawn to a6. This is, again, all master level stuff. At your level, I would expect to see some c5 and so on, but we're going to learn how to play all of these different ideas. And one very common move to prevent black from playing b5 is to play pawn to a4, as you then have the file over here. So you'll notice this bishop struggles to develop, and in general, black is a little bit passive. That is the magic, that is the beauty, if you will, of the Catalan. Now, again, the best way to learn the Catalan is to watch really good players play the Catalan. So that is what we're going to do, first with Magnus, then with me. Because compared to you, I'm a really, really fantastic, excellent, godly level player. But then, of course, compared to Magnus, I am but a small ant just walking in the... No, obviously not like that drastic, but... Okay, so Magnus, only in the last few years here in 2024, has added this opening to his toolbox, and he has become an absolute demon with it. Here is a game where he played against Anish Giri. So far, so good, right? You'll notice everything is the same. And here Anish decided, I'm going to play pawn takes c4, okay? I'm going to be playing the open Catalan, and I'm going to decide what to do. Now, like I just told you, the best way and the main line, the most popular move is queen to c2. It used to be queen to a4, but then people realized that they can't play a4. So they would be taking, and black would be quickly developing this bishop, at which point white doesn't really have much of an advantage. But it is a way to play. Now in this game, Magnus plays another way, and it shows you that you can win this pawn back in a variety of ways. He plays knight to a3. Now that move's actually very annoying. And I have shown this game on this channel, I think, once before. The idea is simply to take like this. So if, let's say, black plays knight c6. You take on c4. This pawn is rock solid. This bishop can't get out. And if the bishop tries to get out, you just win the game. Knight e5. Knight e5, you don't take, but you go here. Knight d5. Again, what do you want in the Catalan? You want two pawns in the center. Pressure on the diagonal. C-file, right? You want to put pressure on the C-file. That's also going to come up in the training game. This is the stuff that you are looking for. Knight to a3 played, not the best move because actually black can give up the bishop and damage the pawn structure. Now, this is a very different type of Catalan. It's a different type of flavor. Like I said, at the master level, things are a little bit different. But watch what Magnus does now. So he plays a4. He stops the b pawn and he controls b5. Also, he wants to put his bishop on a3 because he won that diagonal. Black plays bishop c6. He plays bishop a3. The rook goes to e8. Now, watch what he does with the center. So e4 is not really an idea right now. Queen c2 could be an idea. So let's see what he does. He plays queen c2. Very common square. He's just trying to take this back. Anish gives it to him. Magnus doesn't rush. He doesn't rush because if he took... Whoops. Right? That's a fork. So he doesn't rush. He plays rook c1. And now he takes. And the difference is that when he loses the pawn on a4, he will have long-term pressure over here. In a lot of Catalan positions, you will be down a pawn. And if you are uncomfortable with that, that's fine. You don't have to play this opening, but you know, it's just in your toolbox. But you will know how to put some pressure, right? So rook takes c6 right now is a massive threat because you would also be winning the knight. So the queen goes to d5. And here Magnus sacrifices the rook anyway. And so this game is going to show you how two bishops in this Catalan will absolutely ruin the black position. The knight goes to e5. And I mean, the position is playing itself. Black plays queen b5. Magnus drops back. He's got eyes on c7, then to f7, then to b7, and also rook to b1. The position is incredibly difficult to defend with black, which is why he doesn't defend it correctly and immediately falls under a devastating amount of pressure. He had to play knight b6 here, losing the pawn on b7 completely, which is really difficult to do, and then he had to find knight to c4, losing his rook. And that's very tough to find. And instead, watch this, rook b1, watch how every piece plays. Bishop takes d5. So now the queen cannot take because white's queen targets the knight on a4. So this, boom. This is here. This is here. Queen's also going to stop on f5. Look at these. I mean, they're just not doing anything. Anish tries to get aggressive. Queen f5. I mean, Magnus is just straight up threatening a mate here. And this is 22 moves against a 2770 FIDE rated player. What did he do in this game? He played a Catalan. He played knight a3. It's not even the most common move. Knight a3 is not even the best move. It's around equal, right? a4, bishop a3, queen c2, pressure, rook c1. And this is what happened. He kept some pressure. Queen d5. He sacrificed, and the position just absolutely opened up. Magnus crashes through. If you take the queen, you lose your queen. That's the white queen's not, but yeah, just methodical, simple chess. c7, bishop b2. And in this position, Anish Giri resigned because he was just down 2 clean pawns. Okay, he could have obviously kept playing, but he would have lost anyway. What a game, right? I mean, did he do anything that... I mean, he just played knight a3, right? Knight a3. And all you have to remember from this game is knight a3 is not even the best move, but it's one of the ways you take this pawn back on c4, right? How about this game? Check out this game. Report. One of the best players in the world as well. DC. Okay, so Report, notice, he takes on c4 right away. When did Anish take on c4? He had already played bishop e7 and castles. Report hasn't played bishop e7 and he hasn't castled. Big difference. Okay, bishop g2. He's not in a rush because there is no way for black to hang on to that pawn. Black can try to play b5, but knight e5 comes into play. Let's say knight d5, and then you can castle. And even if black gets the ultimate setup, you are always firing away at it, and I guarantee black is going to blunder something. The other thing is, when black takes off center, you'll see this in the third game that I show you, when there are some positions where black just gets the pawn, but when black takes on c4, white gets to play e4 very quickly. So you can play in a way where you try to win the c pawn back. You can also play in a way where you fight for the center and you get a big attack. So bishop g2, okay? Knight c6. This is the cutting edge idea, is to put pressure on our pawn. Magnus simply castles, and now black wants to play b5, but he can't because he would get obliterated on the diagonal, so he plays rook b8. If you have an opponent who plays knight c6 and rook b8, they clearly know what they're doing. They're obviously very well prepared. The idea is that now knight e5 doesn't walk into a pin, and if white plays queen a4, here comes b5, and this is bad. This is officially bad. This is a black stole the pawn and ran out of the bank, all right? Joker in the Batman with all the school buses, all right? Like, that's what happened. So the way Magnus likes to play this, and there's a handful of ways to play this, one of the ways to play this line is to play pawn to e3, trying to put the queen right here, okay? Let's say bishop e7, queen e2, b5, and there is a move here, pawn to b3. This is yet again another way to play the Catalan where you're just down a pawn. Simply, you're down a pawn, but it's like almost impossible for black to make moves. Like black can castle, you'll play bishop to d2, and you have a rook arriving to the c file, another rook already with an open a file, knight to e5 whenever you want it, which will completely dislodge the defense. Like, let's say black plays a very natural, bishop b7, rook c1. What is black's next move? If black plays knight to e4 looking for your bishop, you can actually give it away. Because after knight takes d2, the knight is hanging. When the knight moves, the extra pawn is gone. And you're going to see how this bishop on our side is very stable, but this position is anything but stable, and you have a sustained pressure on black. Like, it's actually insane how powerful this opening is. In this game, Magnus does not play e3, queen e2. He plays bishop to e3, which is, before he started playing this, a move that I had never seen before. The idea is actually hilarious. He puts the queen on c1. So he overprotects the center, he puts the queen on c1, and when b5 comes in, now he plays b3, and there is no take because of that hanging knight on c6. Some of you may be wondering, what about knight g4? Yeah, but the bishop can move. And then if the knight goes back, we just get a normal game where the bishop already made a move. And then if h6, you can even take, play e3, knight c4, and white is just better forever. So this is a super sneaky opening. And you'll notice, watch, b5, b3, right? Bishop b7. So Magnus gets his pawn back. He gets his pawn back. Knight b4. Positions around equal. Okay, so how are we going to play from here? a3, let's kick the knight out. Knight goes to the middle. And now we do move this bishop so it doesn't get captured. Now the bishop is ready to trade itself. Why is the bishop ready to trade itself? Because oftentimes we will replace the bishop with a wall of dark squared pawns. So the bishop will not really have a presence in our position. So we are happy to move the bishop to g5. Knight bd2, we take, and rook c1. Can Magnus play e3 in this position? Of course, but he doesn't know whether he's going to move the pawn 1 square or 2 squares. So he plays here, and now he has the c-file. You'll see in the training game, I talk about the c-file as well. There's a bunch of different ideas, okay? Let's say report plays knight to d7, and now queen a4. So that targets that pawn. It also targets the light squares. We have c5, trying to get aggressive, giving up the pawn. Report here tries to solve his problems aggressively by giving up some material. The position is equal if black plays like a computer for the entire game, but he doesn't. Black trades and is now worse. He's worse because he's got a weakness, and in this kind of like clash, white was left with an outside pass pawn. With an outside pass pawn that is protected in the corner and has a boost behind it. It is a very difficult position to defend, and he doesn't defend it. Watch, a4, he wins the pawn back, he centralizes, and, you know, slowly that pawn will make it to the end of the board. And there it is. Now, are you going to win this like Magnus? No, probably not, and you will probably blunder some stuff along the way, but I'm not trying to insult you, that's just the way it goes. But again, keep an eye on this, you know, right? Last game, it was bishop e7, bishop g2, castle, castle, dc. We know queen c2 is the main move, and if you don't remember that, just rewatch the video. That's okay, I'm here. Knight a3 is what Magnus chose. In this game, Report took on c4 and played a way to say, I want the pawn. I showed you e3, queen e2, and b3. Magnus played bishop e3 and queen c1. Okay, so he played like this and got his pawn back and slowly put pressure, and that's also totally fine, right? And then he ended up winning the game. Now, there was another game where his opponent played dc and then bishop b4 check, like this. And Magnus played bishop d2, something like castles, and then he played, I think it was e3. This is another way that Magnus has played before. And he then just plays like queen here, applies some pressure, and tries to slowly play e4. He has had games where his opponents control the position like this. So he'll play like queen c2, b5, and we get a very complicated game. But again, I told you, when black hangs on, you can undermine, or you can play for the center with e4. I think Magnus in this game played like knight c3 first, etc. But look, here's a game against Grandmaster Eric Hansen of Chess Bra fame. Look at this. Okay, knight bd7. So closed Catalan. Right? Anish took. So queen c2. Very common. c6, very solid. b3. Okay, we're developing the bishop. Normal stuff. This is a nice way of playing. And in the Catalan, you have multiple plans. Taking on d5 is always an idea, but Magnus pushes for e4. And he gives away the pawn on c4. Right? Gives away the pawn on c4 completely. He doesn't even take it back. Doesn't even take it back. Now, if black were to play cb-ab and play something like rook c8, he's up a pawn, but what white is now going to do is utilize all this. So there have been games here like h4. It's very tough for black to make a move. If black plays c5, you march straight down the middle, so black can't play c5. say black plays h5 trying to stop you. Now you play e5. Black goes to the middle, you bring the knight. Knight g5 and queen h7 is mate. If black tries to block that, you can hop in this way. Bishop takes, pawn takes. That pawn looks a little bit weak. Can't I attack it like this? No. Bishop a3. What about c5? Takes, takes. Looks like you've made some counterplay. Nope. Knight e5. And guess what? Knight g6. So look at, I'm pressuring you on all three sides of the board. Black is completely at the mercy of whatever plan white tries to choose next. Now, you're not going to win games like this. Guess what? I might not even win games like this because this opening takes a lifetime to master. But the point is, it's such a hard position to play. It's not easy for black to make a move. And in this game, you're going to see Carlsen doesn't even take the next pawn. Look, h4, right? And the idea is, again, e5, knight g, like e5, knight e4. This is kind of the idea. Magnus plays slowly. He's still baiting him to take, right? Carlsen doesn't take. So Magnus says, okay, c5, knight to e5. e5 was even stronger, but this was like a speed game. So knight e5, and now he puts a massive clamp. And look at this move, rook d6. What a move. I mean, black has to take. He has to take. If you don't take the rook completely, paralyzes the black position. Carlsen waits a little bit too long to take, and now it's too late. The pawn is protected. It's probably going to be protected twice. It takes away a ton of space, and it's a very easy plan of action for white to just dominate the position. He sacrifices the bishop. Again, it's a speed game, so accuracy here might not be flawless, but I mean, we get here, it's a protected pass pawn on the d6 square, and it is completely winning. So, and then Magnus, I think, converted this relatively without any problems. Yeah, queen d6, and I think Carlsen slipped. He was trying to go here, but it's already +5. So, in a nutshell, the Catalan is one of these openings that you can play for the rest of your life. You can play this setup against any black defense, but they all are a little bit different, like the King's Indian defense, the Grunfeld defense, the Slav defense. This setup can be played against all of them, but they all have different nuances and ideas. But it is really, really good. And you can study the games of Magnus. You can study the games. One of the best practitioners of this opening in his prime was Vladimir Kramnik, who right now is a controversial figure in the world of chess here in 2024. Separate the Catalan player from the man now, and many others. And so this is how Magnus handles this opening. I will now show you how to play this opening against an intermediate player. And I hope you enjoy. Play the Catalan, give it a shot. And in the future, I will be making my own mini course on Chessly, my educational platform, where I've got a bunch of different courses on tactics, end games, middle games, beginner, intermediate, and stuff like that. That will be there. But for now, this is a nice Catalan overview for you. There are the closed systems with c6. There are the open systems with dc. And then there are the quick systems where black tries to take on c4 and hang on to the pawn. And you can see all these different methods of fighting those systems. Enjoy. Okay, so shout out to Johnny, who's volunteering to play this game. I'm going to open with pawn to d4. And we have d5 on the board. c4. Now, all Johnny, I basically just asked some subscribers of mine, and actually these are folks in the Chessly Discord, what openings they play. Johnny said, I play Queen's Gambit declined. So I said, okay, fantastic. Let's have at it. And now we will see what Johnny plays against the Catalan. Now, of course, look, Johnny's like 1290 rapid, right? But that's, statistically speaking, there are quite a bit of people at this intermediate level. And this just so happens to be the one volunteer for today's video, but it could be somebody 1500, 1600, 1700. We'll see what Johnny ultimately chooses. Because, of course, the Catalan at my level, the Catalan at the Magnus level, the Catalan at the Johnny level, and everything in between is all over the place. You don't really know what people are going to play. Many people might just bring another pawn forward because, they know that in the Queen's Gambit, that's a very normal way to play. And as I said in the analysis portion of today's video, like, yeah, you might see c5. a6 is reasonable move as well. I mean, basically, black is trying to take on c4 and play b5 very quickly. But we know that, you know, our Catalan bishop is going to have a lot of opportunities here, as we saw in some of the Magnus games. So the nice thing about this opening is you kind of don't really care what black does. You put the bishop on g2, you castle, and as we see from the Magnus games, you have a very, very kind of slow return on investment. Now, bishop to b4 check makes sense. As I mentioned already, usually you play bishop d2 here, although really any of those moves are fine. Trading the bishop is quite nice because you just develop another piece. Queen takes and bringing the queen out is okay, but also this is very, very fine. And you now have a defense on c4. So you can castle. Okay, b6. I apologize for that. That was not your Discord. That was mine. It's because I didn't have streamer mode enabled. So let's castle. I'm not getting assistance during the game. This I promise. Now, nobody played like this against Magnus, right? So this is very, very normal. I think a lot of people at the intermediate level simply won't touch the pawn once it made it to the center. So it's important for me to kind of show you, you know, even at the intermediate level, how to take advantage. In the Catalan, because you are inherently trading a flank pawn, a c pawn for a d pawn, that is already one small advantage. But also your bishop on g2 is more stable than this one because yours is protected. And this bishop is not protected. You can always play moves like knight to e5. In general, bringing the rook to the c-file is never going to be a bad move. That's a very natural follow-up of this opening. And we haven't done anything exceptional, but that's kind of the point. This is an opening that you can play the entire length of the rating ladder because even though you're not doing anything explosive and crazy and complicated, your opening is extremely solid. It's rooted in very good fundamentals. And it's quite difficult to take advantage of, okay? So now we will see what our opponent does here. Okay, c5, right? This is also a move that we've been expecting, but I will now draw attention to the fact that this kind of plays into the Catalan style pressure. So you can take on c5 and then take on d5. Taking on d5 right away is I can't tell which one is better, just very vaguely, you know, off the top of my head. I think we will likely get to the exact same position, but let's just say we take on c5. So our opponent will now be left with the responsibility of the weak pawn on c5. If our opponent opts to instead take on c4, take on c4, then we take another pawn, and then this pawn's not going anywhere. Okay, that's actually exactly what happens. So now we go here, and this pawn is still there. So we're going to win a pawn now as the position clears out. And actually, we might get a very close... Oh my goodness, my opponent is just falling apart here. They didn't even take back. So now we are 2 pawns up, and we see this. Look at this. I mean, at the end of the day, we still have all the Catalan-style pressure, right? So the opponent lost the clash there and is now simply completely lost. And again, this is a good player, right? This is a good player. Obviously, probably a bit nervous playing me. It happens. You volunteer to play in a video, suddenly your brain turns to mush. But now, you know, we need to show how to win this position. We're going to win this position the exact same way. We're going to just walk into that queenside pressure. Our rook is going to c7 with pressure on the knight. The knight is ready to jump at a moment's notice, and this bishop is going to get involved in the game. And because black never got rid of our pawn here, that pawn will be the deciding factor. Even if we lost the pawn, which we shouldn't, but, you know, we would still be a pawn up, and all of our pressure would be involving that side of the board. Rook c7 is actually a mistake because black can play bishop takes knight, I think. And I don't really want to do that. This pawn is nice, but somehow I thought it would survive a little longer. But I have this move, and now we see the power of the bishop. We see the tactical power of the bishop coming into play. When my opponent takes, we have knight to e5, and that's the end of the game because we open up the Catalan bishop, we put pressure on the knight, and it's a discovered attack. And this is the power of the Catalan, right? Like, of course my opponent blundered, but that's life when you play such an opening. And I will just quickly analyze, you know, what would have happened if my opponent hadn't blundered and didn't play c5 and instead opted to castle. But you're going to win a lot of games like this. I mean, you really are. This is a menacing opening. And I'm, you know, I'm considering adding it to my own toolbox. By the way, that is an excellent move. So if I take on d5, of course I'm going to win a pawn, but then my opponent's going to probably win this pawn. Man, it's not so simple. Okay, let's take on d7. Here we can play simple chess. That was a great move, by the way, by my opponent. So, simple chess. We're 2 pawns up. We can trade down to a rook endgame. The Catalan bishop served its, its purpose. And however my opponent takes, rook takes would be faster to lose because I would play b7, rook c8. But I said this pawn would be the deciding factor, which is the pawn that snuck through all the clash. Yeah, and so now we just capture, and b7, and the rook is going to c8, and that's unstoppable. You just can't stop it. Even if you stop the pawn, rook c8 is GG. So this is like a vintage start-to-finish Catalan victory. And not scripted, didn't tell the person to play like this, right? Oh, they're going to play king h7, and of course now we pick up some pawns to come here. Probably can just do this. Of course, probably shouldn't pre-move like this, but this is in general the winning strategy. I think my opponent might be thinking like, should I resign or should I not resign? Because for the video, you kind of want to play on and just sort of see the way you'd win here. But this is the way we would convert this game. There's really not much my opponent could do, even with the pre-moves. The pawns really can't do a whole lot. Maybe you could try to sneak through, but once we get 2 queens on the board, the win gets quite a bit easier. Although, you should be able to win with a queen. Yeah, now, okay, there's a lot of ways to win. I'm not going to allow my opponent's king to escape. Leave the king here. And then we will check. I think this is mate. Yeah. So, if we do a game review of this game, you have a high chance of getting like 100%. Like a 98%, I played 95.1%. I made 1 inaccuracy, which was bishop to d2, right? But it's the opening. I mean, again, the computer doesn't really, if you let it analyze on high enough depth, right? Bishop d2, we got this position. And white in these positions just maintains this nagging little advantage, like forever and ever and ever. And here already it's 0.7. Already a6 is like kind of not the right way to go. If you're going to play a6, you really should pair it with pawn takes on c4, but this is not an easy thing to do. It's just not. Because even if you get to play b5, I always have moves like knight e5, and even like b3, just very simple, like queen b3, a b3, just giving up a pawn and putting pressure for the remainder of the game on the black position. So thank you to my opponent who was brave enough to volunteer, and hopefully this showed you that, even in a game like this, where I didn't do anything exceptional, c5, and you just lose the game against the Catalan. You have to castle, and here what I would have done is I probably would have taken the pawn and something like this, and I would have just used the c-file to put some pressure. Black might have had to play something like c6, and already we can kind of see like the bishop is absolutely buried. You have ideas of e4, which we saw Magnus play, also just knight to e5. You can't go here because you lose this pawn. I mean, how do you make a move here? Like, it's so hard to make a move, and we just keep putting the pressure, we keep applying the pressure. It's a tough opening to play. It really is. And hopefully this inspires you to give it a try. I will be adding a Catalan kind of a Catalan for beginners, intermediate, early advanced players, also on Chessly. That will be coming soon. But for now, just enjoy this opening, and hopefully this inspires you to play it in your games and win. Maybe like Magnus, maybe like me, or maybe like the rating that you are. So that's all I have for you today. Get out of here.